Venus and star blessings, everyone. I just want to take a few moments to talk about a really significant transit, which is Chiron and the North Node. It's a really important transit for a lot of different reasons, and I'll unpack a few layers to it, including sharing just some themes and keywords around Chiron's significance and the things you could possibly contemplate on and work with and so forth. Before I dive into that, I just want to remind you all that I have a 12-week series of classes coming up, starting actually at the new moon, Aquarius new moon, which is on the 10th of February. You can see the moon there in Libra, which has just been, in the last couple of days, it was trine Pluto, an amazing portal. I really felt that so deeply. Spent a whole day at the beach, just healing, basically, restoring balance within myself. So, yeah, 10th of February, it's 12 weeks. Each class goes for about 3 hours. It's recorded on Zoom. You can join the live or catch the replay. Extensive PDF files and chart examples, and we'll be looking at all the planets, Chiron, various asteroids, including Lucifer and Lilith. And also we'll be looking at the planets from an evolutionary level, evolutionary astrology model, and also we'll be looking at the traditional components of the planets and psychological modern components as well. So there's quite a few lenses we'll be looking through, including some Babylonian ancient astrology as well. So really, really deep, in-depth learning through these classes, and whether you are a beginner or advanced, there's value for you in either case. That I'm absolutely certain of. So reach out, email me if you're interested in joining those classes. So let's get back to Chiron. Chiron, who's Chiron? What is Chiron? Chiron was discovered in 1977. And it's an interesting backstory because, you know, that was a time in history when the whole alternate field and world of healing modalities was really being born at that time in a very prominent way. You know, a lot of new healing methodologies and techniques and principles and teachings and so forth really all emerged around about that time in the 70s. And that's, you know, that's usually what happens when a body is discovered. It is reflected on the condition or conditions of the earth, you know, as above, so below. Chiron was a master, you know, in so many different things. When we hear about Chiron, the most common words we hear is the wounded healer. That's the catchphrase for Chiron. And that is very, very true. There tends to be a lot of it seems to me that there's a very sort of split focus. You know, he's heavily wounded, and he's also this incredible healer. And you know, the wound is actually the gift, which is hard to understand because we can't understand that from our logical left brain, but it actually is, that is the case. One thing that I like to remind people of Chiron is this, because it's very rarely mentioned. Because Chiron was actually abandoned at birth by both of his parents because he was a half horse, half man, and was just not accepted, you know, by his parents, and therefore abandoned and basically rejected. So the key word there is rejection and abandonment, of course. Rejection being a really strong keyword for Chiron that is very rarely mentioned, as I said. And I like to remind people of that because wherever Chiron is in your natal chart, wherever Chiron is transiting, that core principle and core theme of Chiron, rejection, will show in some kind of way. And it typically is a fear of rejection, basically, because that's exactly what happened to him. Chiron lived for over 700 years, by the way. And in that whole time, he actually couldn't heal himself, which is pretty ironic, given that he was one of the masters of healing with so many different modalities and techniques. And he he taught so many of the gods and the goddesses. You know, he was a mentor for Achilles, one of the greatest warriors in the times of Troy. You know, there's so many nuances to Chiron, and so many beautiful stories that go deep into the mythologies and the history, you know, which I don't have time to unpack today, but it is always worth reading up on Chiron's mythology and just really trying to grasp his journey and his experience, because that is us, you know, that is our own journey of our our vulnerabilities, our the components within us that are really vulnerable, and they're like deep sore spots, you know, that if somebody touches that spot, we have a pretty strong reaction to it, you know. Some really great keywords for Chiron. Let me just pull up my file here. So there's several, but I'll just mention a few. So acceptance is one of them, integration, pain, rejection, abandonment, shamanic initiation, shamanism, spiritual growth, spiritual warrior, soul's wound, suffering, victimhood, wholeness, wounded healer, woundedness, uniting opposites, unseen forces, instincts, initiation, impersonal energies, holistic, anything to do with the healing realm in whatever form, structure, modality, technique that is seeked out or experienced or integrated. Gifts, our hidden gifts from the point of view of healing. He's the cosmic messenger. Cleansing, denial of higher self, bridge between worlds. The bridge between worlds is an interesting one, because Chiron is basically the next body after Saturn in terms of the order of the planets in the heavens before we get to Uranus. So Chiron is the key for our liberation, essentially, literally. To get from Saturn to Uranus in our own consciousness, we must integrate and embrace Chiron. To access Chiron and to embrace Chiron and to work through those very deep personal wounds, we have to take responsibility, Saturn, for ourselves, for our own healing journey, for our own life, and step into Chiron's cave and be, you know, face to face, head on, if you like, Aries head, with our own deep personal wounds. And it can take lifetimes, you know, it's not something that we do in one day or 1 month or even 1 year. It can take lifetimes, or it can take a lifetime. It just depends. These are the more specific nuances that pertain to a particular soul's journey. But we are speaking about Chiron today from Chiron transiting in Aries as a collective portal, but also how that might speak to us personally as well. In any case, whether we are looking at this natally or whether we are looking at it from a collective transit, in order to, as I said, to step into the unknown Uranus, where there's no security here. All sense of security comes from here, from Saturn. But if we just project that Saturn onto the consensus reality, which is what the consensus reality is, it's Saturn, and therefore we give our authority away to this consensus reality, it's very difficult from that place to work on going to Chiron's cave, work on our own deep personal wounds, our fears of rejection. Lots of different fears come out of Chiron. It's very difficult to work on any of that and liberate ourselves, Uranus, if we remain at that consensus Saturn level. So Saturn is one of the greatest teachers, literally one of the greatest teachers. Saturn is a very difficult archetype, a very difficult energy. And we learn probably some of the hardest lessons through Saturn, actually. But the trick with Saturn is to integrate it internally, right, and become our own author, our own authority, which means taking responsibility for ourselves and our life on every single level. When we do that, we have a much a stronger chance to work with Chiron in the most positive way, for lack of a better word, which ultimately does lead to self-liberation, Uranus. So at the moment, with Chiron in Aries, conjunct the North Node in Aries. So the North Node is a really powerful point, of course, in our own chart. It works in tandem with the South Node. You can never separate the two. Everything works with a polarity axis anyway, right? But this is just a very obvious one because we always see the South Node and North Node in opposition to each other. They are never in any other possible description other than an exact opposition. But when we are looking at other polarities in the chart, like if we look at Uranus at the moment, it's in Taurus, right? But we don't really think about the fact that Uranus is actually in Taurus and its polarity point is Scorpio. We just don't think about that. In evolutionary astrology, the concept of polarity is something that is it's the underpinning of the teachings of the archetypes in astrology. When you are looking at any archetype, you always need to remember it has a polarity point, and that polarity point is playing into and working with that archetype that you are looking at. So everything has a polarity. Now, the North Node, I'm not going to talk about natal North Node. Let's just think about it from the point of view of the transiting North Node for the collective world. It's speaking to the direction that the entire world is integrating towards. So it's a collective integration, if you like, in Aries. And I've sort of spoken about this through various videos, but, the themes that have really come up very strongly, of course, with the nodes transiting in Aries and Libra are these matters of war, conflict, and the lack of peace, actually, Libra, harmony and balance. And of course, the relationships in the world, as in our own personal relationships and just the relationships that people have with each other on that collective level, the relationships that nations have with each other, that, a country has, any country has a relationship with another country, basically relationships across the board have been, greatly impacted and emphasized during this journey of the nodes in Aries Libra. And the sheer lack of harmony and balance has really shown and revealed itself. And the necessary integration and journey that we've had to become aware of within ourselves from the point of view of our relationships in general, understanding our relationships, understanding everything about relationships, actually, and just who we are as a person, as an individual, Aries, within the context of all these relationships, and any imbalances in our relationships and things like that have all, really come to the surface, for the last 18 months or so, almost a year or whatever it's been. But the North Node is also, relative to traditional astrology, it also corresponds to, it's considered to be a benefic point, how we have benefic planets and malefic planets. So in traditional astrology, the North Node is a benefic point, and the South Node would be considered as a malefic point. That's just another perspective. I don't want to focus too much on the malefic side of it, as it were. I'd rather focus on the benefic side, North Node, which another way of understanding the North Node is it corresponds to connections we make with people along our journey, along our path in our life, right? So the connections and associations and alliances that are reflected by the North Node are interpreted or understood as being individuals or groups that really assist us in our path of growth and evolution. So having Chiron conjunct the North Node, therefore, one layer of this would be connecting with individuals at this time that really assist us in our path of healing. Everyone is healing something at some point in their life. Some people are just much more in tune and much more aware and much more conscious and much more willing to embark on that journey, despite of how difficult it may be. And there are lots of other people that are not so aware of it, are more unconscious, have a lot more resistance to it. I follow this dancer on Instagram and YouTube. He's one of my favorite dancers, and he's just incredible in my opinion. And, you know, he's a choreographer, a teacher and so forth. And he's just recently done an Australian world tour. And I had bought a ticket to go to one of his classes, and something came up and I couldn't go. And I was so gutted. I felt so wounded. You know, I was just, I was crying because I couldn't go, right? And that particular day, believe it or not, there was a Ceres Venus conjunction in Sag, right? Ceres is loss, pain, grief. When you lose something, and Venus, of course, is dancing. That's just an interesting side note, right? But I swear to God, everything is reflected in astrology if you understand the symbols. And the reason I'm bringing him up is because, you know, I've been following him for a few years, and pretty much all he posts is his classes, you know, different little clips of classes that he's taught and things like that, which is, you know, just awesome if you appreciate dance. But I noticed the other day, he uploaded a little video of about, I don't know, 30 seconds or something like that. And it was, well, he's still here in Australia, and he was at the beach, and he just wrote something very simple, but it really struck me because he allowed himself to be publicly vulnerable. And, you know, when you look at somebody that you really admire in whatever field that may be, whether it's in academia, in science, in dancing, in sports, you know, whatever it may be, we have this tendency to view an individual through our admiration and love and reverence, you know, for their abilities or talents or whatever it is. We place them up on a pedestal, not consciously, but this is what we do. And we just look at them as this, you know, incredible being that's just amazing in their craft or talent or whatever. And through that process, we've placed them up at such a high level that we forget that they're human. You know, we do that a lot with celebrities, like pop stars and things like that. You know, we revere them as if they're gods and goddesses, right? And the truth remains that every single one of these people that we may project that onto is a soul undergoing their own journey as well. And they too have their own wounds. And so getting back to this guy, he was just speaking about the time that he spent in Australia was a really an interesting time for him, because he was alone a lot of the time. And I guess he's not used to being alone, or he's often around a lot of people when he's in America or Paris, because I think he commutes between the two countries. And that alone time really, it really got him into a space where he was focused on aspects of himself that were experiences that he'd had that were deeply painful, you know, real sore spots, real Chiron wound type of things. And he was just acknowledging that he was, you know, not perfect, and that he had things to work on as well, and that this trip really brought that home to him, you know. So I'm just mentioning that as a side note, just as an example of how we tend to forget that these people that we may project the god goddess, you know, archetype or principle or energy onto, they too have their, you know, their limitations, their fears, their vices, their habits, their pains, their grievances, you know, every single human does. So getting back to the North Node, as I was saying, speaks to alliances and associations and people or peoples that we may form, you know, some sort of connection with that really, really assist us in our personal journey of growth and healing. And that may not be obvious sometimes, and sometimes it may be really obvious. The path that might not be as obvious might be more subtle. You know, there's lots of different scenarios that could connect with that, but it's just important to understand that it might not be so obvious immediately, but it should become more clear to you as time goes on. Because this transit with Chiron and North Node it's already been there for the last week, and it's actually going to be there really for the entire month of February. So it's a pretty long transit, actually, relative to, you know, a body being conjunct the North Node, right? Also, you know, this is, I guess, you know, this is a great time for any type of therapy, any type of healing work that you either want to, you know, take on for your own personal journey, and or helping others as well. Because Chiron was in service, you know, his whole time while he lived. It was alleged that he lived to be over 700 years of age, and that whole time he was literally in service for the divine source creation to all things. Admittedly, he was trying to find a healing, you know, method for his own wound, and that's what drove him to becoming this master at everything that he tackled and learned and taught people and so forth. But he never gave up, you know, and he also understood that he was in service to everybody. So Chiron is also what we are, what we offer in service to others as well, you know, because one thing I like to remind myself of, and everybody as well, is that unless you've walked through the fire, you'll never know what that's like. Because I was a therapist for many years as well, and I worked with a lot of different clients, from, you know, from various ages to various backgrounds to various issues, it, you know, it became very clear to me that, I mean, empathy is a great quality and gift, and everyone, I guess, has it to some, well, not everyone, some people lack it completely, like sociopaths and serial killers and things like that. And you know, the truth is that a lot of people in leadership actually lack empathy. So, you know, in my opinion, a lot of them are just sociopaths, basically, but that's another story. But yeah, to really understand somebody's pain, you have to have walked through that path, as it were, you know, have been in that type of fire. That's when we can truly empathize with another. Empathy means to step into somebody's shoes, right, and really feel what they are experiencing or what they are feeling. So Chiron North Node conjunction, lots of opportunities for our own personal healing journey. Lots of opportunities for connecting with healers. Now, that can be astrologers as well. Chiron was an astrologer. Astrologers are healers as well. There's some really bad astrologers out there. I've seen that. But, you know, there's bad eggs everywhere. They exist in every community, in every society, in every stream, no matter what field, right? That's just how it is. But Yeah, astrologers, good astrologers are healers as well. And so, this might be a great time for you to connect with a particular astrologer that you resonate with, whether that's myself or somebody else. It's a good time to seek out these opportunities at the moment, because the implication is that there is benefit here with Chiron North Node conjunction in Aries. There is benefit from the point of view of working on yourself in those deeper landscapes, those deeper components that tend to be, hidden, suppressed. We tend to resist. There's a lot of fear around those sorts of things, because it like, I can't emphasize enough, when Chiron is activated in us, it is a deeply, deeply, deeply raw, painful spot. It's imagine having, a deep, deep, deep cut, into your arm, and it's been stitched up and then it's been bandaged, right? That's the wound. And imagine somebody coming along and ripping off the bandage and, stabbing you with a knife in that wound, right? That's kind of, to use some sort of analogy or metaphor to explain, just how deeply painful. Like if you have a deep wound and somebody pulls off the bandage and gets a knife and goes back into that wound, imagine how painful that would be. That's how painful Chiron can be when it's activated in us, right? Or triggered, rather, perhaps, and Chiron is often triggered by certain situations and certain individuals that we interact with, right? But as I said at the very beginning, in order to heal ourselves, which is part of the primary reason we are here as individuals, as conscious beings, we are working on a lot of different things from a soul evolutionary level. And one of those things is healing aspects of ourself that we have suppressed, denied, that have not been given a voice. It could be, past life story things where we have been deeply wounded by another or others, and it's been covered up. We've just blocked it, suppressed it, because the memory of it is so deeply painful. So we all bring in stuff that we are working on. So the path of healing is something that is always active. It's always there for us to pay attention to. And when you have a Chiron North Node transit going on for about a month in the sky, it's a really prominent window to work on that. It's the light is shining on that energy. It's being illuminated, right? Showing us, here's an opportunity to work on some really deep components. Now, what's the benefit of doing that? Well, there's many benefits. When we heal ourselves in many, many different ways, there's so many ways we can heal ourselves, and there's so many things we may need to heal. And as I said before, we don't do it all at once, but the more we can heal ourselves, the more we can heal the world, the more we can heal our relationships, the more we can heal how we interact with people, the more we can heal our perceptions, the prejudices that we have, the judgments, the very black and white, narrow perspectives, that all that stuff, that all needs to be healed. Because to see heaven on earth, to see wholeness and unity, we must become whole and unified within ourselves. Otherwise, how can we see that outside of ourselves? When the fact of the matter is that everything we see outside of ourselves is an unconscious projection from what we have denied within ourselves. So Chiron really helps us in these sorts of processes. So really that's the main kind of points that I wanted to speak to. Let me think. And I guess, in Aries, there can be, some of the themes in Aries as well, correspond to deep self-doubt, self-doubt and, lack of self-worth, or not trusting your instincts, because Aries is the archetype that, truly corresponds to instincts. And Chiron also speaks to our instincts as well. So it is really important that we trust our instincts in this journey. Standing up for ourselves as well. It could be matters around sabotaging ourselves as well, self-sabotage, unconsciously. There can be, deep underlying anger and rage with Chiron in Aries as well. And, if there is deep underlying anger and rage, and that is being suppressed, that is very dangerous for ourselves and the world, So this is why we have to heal on these components within ourselves that we have not given a voice to, have not honored, have not respected. And, there's lots of reasons why that happens. We live in a world where, especially if you're a woman, expressing anger is just not accepted when you're a woman. We still live in that kind of world, like the Dark Ages. It's just incomprehensible, but it's another story, I guess. So anyway, Chiron in Aries is about owning those components of ourself. And some of those things might be anger, might be rage, might be, any and all of those things. And it's not about not being okay with that and not accepting that. Remember, one of the key words was acceptance, And of course, think about where Chiron in Aries is in your natal chart, because everything that I've spoken to will somehow emerge out of where Chiron is placed in your natal birth chart. That will be the area of where it's really activated, and it spends a very long time in Aries. It's one of those signs where it spends years and years and years. Chiron has a strange elliptical orbit and spends many, many years in certain signs, and then could spend, just 2 years in another sign. Aries is one of the long journeys, which is really, really interesting, because it's really saying, therefore, that if Chiron spends so many years in this archetype, what does that mean? It means that we have to heal ourself. Aries is the self, the individual self, your sense of identity and who you are. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. They're the main. Oh, that's right. Just finally, because this is just as important, and I meant to bring this up at the beginning as well. The Chiron conjunct North Node in Aries, I feel as well, is reflecting a lot of people on the earth at the moment, individuals that are basically speaking up for those that are, greatly disadvantaged and far less privileged. And I am one of those people, which is why I've spoken about Palestine right from the beginning, and I still do, because Palestine and numerous other countries around those regions, it's not just Palestine, but Palestine is a focal point and has been for some time now, although the truth is what we are seeing has actually been going on since 1948. It's just the world has now woken up to what has been going on for decades. It's not a new thing. It's just new to the consciousness of the collective. So people who are speaking up for the less disadvantaged and the less privileged is also a Chiron North Node window. Holding the space and the voice for those individuals that cannot speak for themselves, because they're either their lives are being taken away, they have no electricity, they have no internet, they have no way of communicating their pain, their rage. And so they need people like us to speak for them, because the world needs to be aware of what is going on. And the world, Pluto in Aquarius, humanity, needs to be united and needs to understand what is happening everywhere, not just in our own backyard. Because once again, if one country is oppressed, and there's several of them that are, but if one country is oppressed, then all of us are oppressed. Whether you believe that or not, whether you like that or not, whether you accept that or not, it actually doesn't matter. It's a fact. True liberation must exist on the entire collective plane. Unity comes from all of us being on the same page. This is Pluto in Aquarius for 20 years. So when we speak up Chiron North Node on the less, on those that are, you know, far less privileged than someone like you that's listening, or myself, who are not living in a, you know, war zone. You know, those children in Palestine, they have never, ever known what it's like to live without terror. They've never known what it's like to live without terror. Imagine that. We take it for granted, depending on where we live. But most of the world does not live in the circumstances that the Palestinians do. And even though, as I said, we may think that, well, that's that part of the world, it doesn't affect me. Well, it does affect us, actually, in ways that are just far too complex to try and even begin to unpack here in this presentation for today. There are ripple effects on everything. Nothing is not connected. Everything is connected. When governments and people in power can go into a country and just kill people, that means that that can happen anywhere, anytime. It is happening with the acceptance. No one's doing anything about it. People are just watching it. These are facts. Do not forget, these are facts. And if it's happening there, it can happen at our doorstep. That's what we need to realize. That's why it's so important to be aware, to understand, to stand for truth and justice, to remove our biases, remove our prejudices, and just come back to the point of unity and fairness and equality and justice for all. For all. So, Chiron North Node, very powerful portal for what we want to heal within ourselves, what we want to try and heal within ourselves, because it doesn't happen overnight. But if this journey, you know, is the advocate for you stepping into something that you've always been afraid to step into, starting to work on something that you've really struggled to work with before, then this is a golden opportunity, isn't it? Because it just comes back to what I said, you know, if we don't heal ourselves, we cannot see a world that is healed. It's as simple as that, bottom line. Okay, so I'll see you guys soon. I'm going to come back and talk about the new moon in Aquarius before my classes start. And yeah, just reach out if you want to join the classes. As I said, they start on the 10th of February, just with a beautiful new moon in Aquarius, which is my natal moon. So that feels really like a beautiful alignment to start this next segment for myself. And also with today's comments and insights, and I hope they've been helpful. The last few days I've had to withdraw from posting and looking at what's happening in Palestine specifically. And I've just had to focus on my own health, right? My own well-being and my own healing. And it's been this Chiron North Node energy that's really tapped something inside me, really activated something inside me that it's so bizarre. I'll just tell you this backstory quickly. The other day, I was vacuuming my bedroom, and there's a device attached to my vacuum cleaner. It's a bit hard to explain, but anyway, this device, it cracked, right? And the place I bought it from is like on the complete different side of where I live. And so I rang up the same store that's closer to me on the side where I live, which is near the Bayside area. And it happened to be that this shop was about an hour's drive away from where I live. But I was happy to go because it was basically along the coastline, right, along the beach. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll just take my vacuum cleaner, get it repaired, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll try and find a nice beach spot. The drive there was so healing for me. The guy fixed my vacuum cleaner in 2 minutes, so that was great. I didn't have to spend any time there, really. And then I went to these areas that I hadn't been to, no joke, for 30 years. And I was so young the last time I was there. I was just like this little kid. And I was standing back in this spot and I was looking at the coastline, the ocean. I could see, the entire sort of coastline of Melbourne. It was so beautiful, so therapeutic. And then I drove back down and I found this gorgeous beach and found a spot where there was nobody really, because I like to be totally alone. And I just sat there for a few hours in the water and just really being one with nature. And I'd had severe neck pain and back pain for a few days before that. And anyway, that day, I just felt so healed. I felt all I could feel was love throughout my entire body. It was just so beautiful. That was a Chiron moment for me at the highest level, you could say. But my point is that the universe created this device on my vacuum cleaner to crack, which led me to going to a destination that I would normally never go to because it's pretty far away and I don't tend to drive long distances. I tend to be a very local kind of person. And that's actually to my detriment because once we get out of our comfort zone, we experience things that we otherwise wouldn't. And that's the point to this story as well. We've got to get out of our comfort zone, right, to experience different things. And that's what this situation ultimately did. Got me out of my comfort zone, etc., etc. I'm sure you understand the point to the story, which listening to it may not sound like a big deal, but if you were me and you felt what I was feeling, it was a very big deal. And it was a beautiful deal. Okay, I'll see you guys soon for the new moon. Much love and bye for now.